Good evening, and this is Noreen McClendon. I am your host, facilitator of Free to Heal. And Free to Heal is a group that we come together every week so that we can try to heal the ravages of what incarceration has done to individuals who have been incarcerated, their loved ones, the children, and our communities as a whole. And we are very fortunate every week to come together and support each other and learn things. And tonight's discussion was about trauma. In particular, we started off with a discussion about how there are levels of trauma, but no matter who you are, nobody's trauma is more intense than the other. In other words, there's a saying that God won't put more on you than you can handle. So I use the example that I had 21 hours of labor to have my son. Some women may have 3 hours of labor, but it doesn't mean that their pain wasn't as intense in 3 hours as mine was in 21 hours. So in other words, yes, there are levels, there are things. We had similar experiences. We had children, we had labor pains, but mine was just longer, but it didn't mean that it didn't hurt them as bad as it hurt me. So look at trauma the same way. It's very important to realize that you can't necessarily compare your trauma to anybody else's trauma, nor should you be comparing trauma. Oftentimes people do that in an attempt to minimize and say, well, somebody should just be able to get over it. Because they had an experience, but it wasn't as bad as the one I had. Well, that is not a good way to look at trauma. Trauma happens to everyone. And another really important point that was made by several of the participants tonight was once they understood that those traumatic events that happened to them were not their fault. They didn't deserve it. They didn't earn it. They didn't set themselves up for it. In other words, that it was easier for them to begin to get over trauma. And one of the things, because we talked about trauma last week, but one of the things I wanted to talk about specifically tonight was what are the things that people are doing to help get over their trauma, to try to deal with it, to try to cope with the trauma that they experience. And so we had good things. One of those, again, was understanding that the traumatic event was not their fault. Another is trying to keep, other people said they try to keep as normal a routine through trauma as possible. Some meditate, some pray. Some people, which I think is good, is ask for help. Several people said that they need to talk about it. And the more they talked about it, the more they were able to begin to get over it. Personally, being of service to other people helps me deal with my own trauma. I don't know whether that's a distraction or what, but I do know that it literally helps me when I'm of service to other people. And I had somebody else to say that experience worked for them as well. Another person talked about they have conversations with themselves. They talk themselves through it. They remind themselves that this will pass and they can't undo it and all of those kinds of things. One person said that they go to a specific place. Another person said that they listen to a particular kind of music that helps them to get through those moments that would bring them down as a result of trauma. One of the other things I think is important to recognize is that was discussed is that trauma can show up in various ways. And there are 3 ways in particular that are pretty common. One is fear of being in that situation again or anything that looks like that situation. It's pain, very emotionally painful. And the other one is anger without a proper outlet for it. And all of those things can be triggered continuously. One of the most powerful things that I heard tonight was trauma is like a suitcase. You never empty the suitcase. It's just a matter of how are you carrying it? How is it packed? Sometimes you're repacking it. Sometimes the things are hanging out the side, they're all over the place, and other times it's neatly packed away and you can carry it around, and it's okay at those moments. So for us tonight, it was a grand discussion, and I'm just incredibly impressed every week by the people that come and share their experiences, and then they also share those things that help them to get over things. One person talked about the fact that while traumatic things happened while they were incarcerated, they were more traumatized getting out of prison because things had changed so much. They had been gone for 26 years. Things had changed so much in the way that people talked to them and the things that people expected of them. So it was more traumatic for them getting out of prison, which doesn't sound like it would make sense. But we can never argue with another person's experience. So I want to encourage everybody. The thing that we discussed a lot was trying to understand what happened and getting some help, talking to somebody. Getting professional help just to talk to somebody sometimes can set you on a path called straight. A lot of people self-medicate and they don't realize, and that spirals into addiction, and it spirals into another whole set of um, problems. And all the while doing those things, the actual trauma has never been addressed, and it certainly hasn't been fixed. So we learned tonight for sure that you got to address that trauma. The other thing is that nobody lives alone. We all need someone, and we certainly need it when traumatic events help or traumatic events occur. And it's one of the reasons, again, why we do Free to Heal. And I post these videos so that people who can't be in the room with us, who may have these experiences, may not feel so alone, and they may know that somebody understands what it is that they're experiencing. So I say to you all, come back every week. Again, if there's a topic you want us to discuss, by all means, put it in the chat. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media platforms, Facebook. And we just encourage you to come back week to week and join us. And we look forward to any comments or any feedback that you have. And so thanks again for joining us at Free to Heal. And I'm Noreen McClendon, and I'll see you next week. Sorry, I just had a... Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Free to Heal. Welcome. Yeah. Okay, y'all know we come together every week. We're trying to get over the ravages of incarceration. Last week, we talked about something that I want to go back to, and it's something that you all discussed that we needed to talk more about. And it was your topic, Ms. Dye. It was trauma. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to say why it was important that we had this conversation. And then, but before you get started, I think we probably, well, he's on the phone. Big James was coming, and I was going to give him a chance to check in.
Okay.
Before, but now he's on the phone, so he's distracted. So why don't we go ahead and move forward? And you can tell us from your perspective why you wanted to talk about trauma.
The reason why I want to talk about trauma, because people believe, like in life, that their trauma is more traumatic than the next person's trauma. Just because I didn't go down that road, or my parents didn't take that route, or this specific thing did happen to me, my trauma is my trauma. My trauma is valid to me, just like your trauma is valid to you. No one's trauma is more is difficult than the other person's trauma, because that's their trauma, that's their truth, that's what they live, that's what happened. So to me, it doesn't matter how big the trauma, how small the trauma is just trauma. Everybody needs to understand that. Don't try to pick and choose a situation and make it seem like your situation was more difficult than mine because my mom was at home. Because my mom was at home, that means that my mom was giving me all the attention, love, and affection that I really needed, and nourishment that I needed. You know what I'm saying? So trauma is just what it is. It's just called trauma. Everybody been through some kind of trauma in their life.
Thank you. And one of the things that people often try to put levels on what it is, but what I in that vein of what you said, it doesn't matter who you are or what the experience is. The trauma for everybody is, in other words, you still feel it, and it almost makes me think about how Yahweh is not going to put more on you than you can handle. So it's like, you know what I'll use? I'll use this even as a better analogy, and that is um, when women have babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had 21 hours, no meds, but a woman who had 3 hours of labor, I can't say that mine was any worse than hers because her pains may have started coming faster and more furious than mine did over the 21 hours that I was in labor. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, again, you could say this trauma is more intense than this trauma. The trauma, the pains of labor in her 3 hours were as intense as mine were in 21 hours. So there's no judging it up and down as
Right.
to whose trauma is more, just like whose labor is more intense. And so you
Mm-hmm.
want to say something, come just closer so they can hear, because you also don't speak that loud. That's okay. Here, I'll try to roll back to you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I was gonna say, it's just like people. You got some people that go to jail, get arrested, and go to county jail and hang themselves, and some people do 40 years and 50 years and stuff because it's the person and what they have inside of them, whether they can stand what they're going through or not.
Very good. And can you check in?
Hello, fellas. Today I am trying to do better. I am better than I was yesterday, and I'm still progressing. I'm still fighting the fight of life.
Wonderful. Glad to have you. You were going to say something.
It's personal. It's personally quantified. I've often been told, well, you survived it and you don't have a record, so you should be good. Mm-hmm. But my trauma is no different, no deeper, no less than someone who went to prison or someone who went to jail. You know, it's a constant conversation that I used to have with my cousins because they deemed me as making it. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Doc. You know, trauma is trauma. You don't quantify trauma, someone else's trauma, based on the things that you've been through, because every single solitary one of us takes a different step at every turn. And so it looks different to what one has gone through. I always longed for the life that my friends had because of all the trauma that was going on in my household. But when I realized my friends were being molested by their uncles, and I had 5 uncles at home that never touched me, I began to understand that it is a personal quantification of what your trauma looks like.
Yeah, and that's a great example because so trauma and grief kind of go hand in hand often. And one of the things that in training to be a grief recovery specialist, the trainer was explaining to us that even if both people have lost their parents, like my mom's deceased, Di's mom is deceased. Well, you can't say, I know how you feel, I know what you're feeling, because you didn't have the relationship that they had with their mother.
Right.
It's a different relationship, so the experience is going to be different. You can empathize, you can try to understand, you can sort of relate, but to say you know how somebody is feeling is not exactly a true statement. And so it's always better to, in grief, there's something I learned called the sacred silence. Sometimes it's just being around somebody and letting them say what they need to say, not say anything. Oftentimes we feel the need to want to have something to say or give words of encouragement to help them get through something, when sometimes it's just they need your presence, or they don't need your presence. It brings a thought about something I learned that I like to share with people whenever the opportunity presents itself, and that's this. When people die, a lot of times people have a tendency to go to the family's house and they hang out for hours on end and all of that. And I just want to discourage people from doing that. Unless you're an immediate family member who has been asked and requested to be there, families need to process what has actually happened. And so I would say don't do that. Di, I see you want to say something about it?
Yeah, because I just went through that this week, last week, this week really, and I've been knowing these people for 30 years plus, but I didn't feel the need to sit there every day with them. You know what I'm saying? Because they're my friends, they're very close people, but they, as a family as a whole, all the sisters, all of them need to go through that process, on their own. I didn't need to be there every time they was having tacos, or I didn't feel the need to be there like that. I felt the need to show my presence and do what was asked of me to do. And that was the end of that for me. Because I feel like you said, it's time, families need to go through that by themselves and grieve that process themselves.
Yeah, because it occurred to me when my brother died. It was a weekend, it was a rainy weekend, which at that time was kind of unusual for it to be storming like that the whole weekend. And so as a result, a lot of people didn't come out, which was good because it was unexpected that he would pass. We didn't expect it. So in order just to even process that this was really happening, I needed that time. And then I also had the experience when my mother passed that my coworkers, they all worked for her, and their thought was they wanted to fix dinner for the family during that week or whatever. But what it turned into was them having a domino and card party at my house. And when they left, I wound up having to clean up behind them and all of that stuff. And that's the last thing I needed, was another something on my plate. But by the time they finished, I had to clean up all the stuff and put everything away. And so therefore it really wasn't as helpful to me as they thought it was, because it just wound up being a party on their behalf. And I just, I just had to. So I always offer that whenever this conversation comes up is, I would just not advise going, unless now in another situation, I had a family member to request me to come to see them. And when that happened, I went and I sat as long as she wanted me to be there, because that was the experience that she was having and what she wanted at that time. So there's so often, but the issue is that because that's a traumatic experience when we lose a loved one, somebody that we care about, and they don't have to be blood.
No.
But when we lose someone, there's a sense of shock.
Very.
Going to go into. And so you need to be able to process that. But the traumas at all levels, all of the trauma is trauma. And again, I think it's a very good thing to mention, not trying to put a value or a level on other people's trauma and grade it according to what your trauma is. Now, what I'm going to ask everybody is, I want everybody to start chiming in. What are some of the things that you have done in your life to deal with trauma? Go ahead, Mr. Steffens.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when you come through racism and discrimination, then brainwash it, where that you're not valid. What you have to say is not important. Who you are is not important. When you have to endure things at a young age, things was going on that you had no answer to. And you carried that with you all your life. And then you try to filter out what was it that made me feel the way that I felt, and what made me become the person I became. Trauma has a way to take life on its own, and it's dramatic. It is very, very, very real. And when you have to live through trauma, people getting beaten, getting spit on, people getting drug out their homes at a young age, it takes on a different type of feeling. And what I've done since I've grown up enough to understand that it wasn't my fault to what happened to me from where I'm from, the Deep South, from a segregated state. And I have tried to see people on a personal level. I want to be treated the way that I treat others. And I hope and I'm sincere that people can see that and can understand that although I have deep scars and they may not never be healable, but I try to go through life in a godly sense and think about what it is to love and to care, what it is to understand. And all these things is a contribute from what I gone through at a young age.
And you know what? There's something really important. I think that it may sound counterintuitive and it may not sound like it connects, but when you talked about love and focusing on that, that will help you get over trauma. One of the ways that coping things is to be of service to other people.
Yes.
And to take the focus off of yourself can help to ease some of that pain from trauma and help you get through a traumatic situation because you're focusing your attention on something else. And so I've channeled a lot of my pain and trauma into the work that I do. And that's one of the tools that I use is by being of service to other people and helping them with the same things and understand the things that I've learned and that I've been through has been able to help me overcome some of my own trauma and at least to be able to deal with it. So thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? What tools have you used to deal with trauma, the traumas that you've experienced?
This is Patrick.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Patrick, and then we'll come back to you, Rufus.
Okay. For me, I've got two sides of the family. One participates like the Irish side where you have a wake 3 or 4 days to a week after. And it's not a sorrow situation. It's you celebrate the person's life and how they contributed to society. And that's helpful. But then I have the French side of my family where everybody turns reclusive. Everybody doesn't want to deal with it. They want to pretend to be ostriches and sort of hide, in the basement in the house. But for me personally, because I've had people die on both sides of my family, for me, just try to have some type of order. Yeah, you acknowledge that the people are dead, but you still work, you have a routine, you participate in things. And when you can help people, you tell yourself in your mind, hey, I'm doing this because this is what the person who died would have done. They would have helped someone. They would have given of themselves. And you quietly on your own do something to help others. And you're right, it does help. It's also a good diversion and it's good for society anyway. Right. You feel better because you're productive in doing something and your environment and situation is good. You have to acknowledge things that hurt you and you have to not directly deal with them, but sort of gradually deal with them. There are times where you think about certain stuff and you're really, really sorry. Mm-hmm. And then there are other times where you can be sad, but you're not so incapacitated where you can't do anything. You have to work through the trauma. And like you guys were saying, different degrees of trauma affect people in different ways. Right. Like she's right. You can go to jail and be traumatized, and you can go to prison and be traumatized. Or you can just go through the court process where you realize, hey, I've had friends that were in prison 40 years, and then you go to trial and you go, guess what? I'm not going to prison. You dodged the bullet. That's a whole lot of trauma when you realize, when you watch people go to prison, not just for doing something that they were actually guilty of, but doing something for what they weren't guilty of. We've got a lot of people in our society that either are innocent or didn't do things as severely as the courts say, and they're either in prison for 30, 40 years or life. And in a more compassionate society, they wouldn't have gone to prison at all. They would have had counseling. You remember the 60s and 70s, they didn't prosecute like they do now. You had counseling, you had diversion. Unless you actually committed brutal violence or murder, you didn't have the prisons full. We had 8 prisons, you know, in the early years of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. In other words, what the hell happened?
Right.
Yeah,
It became big business. It became big business.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It became big business. But something that you mentioned though, and I see you, something that you mentioned though that really struck me too is the trauma associated just with going to trial, just being in that situation. I have a family member now whose situation happened with her son, and I mean she's in her 60s, never been to jail, nothing like that, and the notion that that potential sentence was hanging over her head was just traumatic, especially for something that that just didn't happen. She didn't do it. And so
that's the trouble with our society. You can be 60 and 70 and they'll give you a life sentence. Well, when you're that old, 5-10 years is a life sentence.
It can be a life sentence. Exactly. Thank you. I got to go to Rufus and then I'll come to you, James. I saw your hand. Thank you, Patrick. Rufus, you wanted to share.
Yeah, I just want to comment on I think her name Diane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what she said, and I agree. I feel like anybody who suggests that there's levels of trauma in that way kind of don't understand trauma. You know what I mean? And because trauma, like she said, trauma is trauma. Mm-hmm. I don't care if if a dog bark at me and it scared the hell out of me, that's trauma. And that can lead me to, down a slippery slope, mentally. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean? And it's just the dog barked at me or something. But as far as me dealing with trauma, I feel like, personally, I feel like, first of all, the tools that I use is, first of all, I had to understand that, it wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? That trauma happened to me, and then after I realized that it wasn't my fault, then, I addressed it from there. And, just understanding that, I don't want to blame nobody, but just say that, just basically it wasn't my fault, and
you know what? And I think that
I
gets
had
to some level of understanding. And once we understand things and we can place it in a perspective, that tends to help us to move forward and not be stuck in that location anymore or stuck in that space, because we actually have an understanding. Because when we don't understand it, that's like a place of unknowing and the unknown, and that's definitely not a good thing. But once you get it, then you get it.
Right. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. And James, go ahead, and then I'll come to you. James, you're gonna have to come so they can hear you and see you.
Well, the thing is this, and this is what I tell people that ask me. Some people are traumatized going to jail. I was traumatized more coming out of prison. Coming into a society where everybody was telling me this, that, and the other, but it was totally different. I had to be walked through just like a kid at 50-something years old. That's trauma within itself. And as a grown man, you don't want to be walked like you're 21, like you're 12, 15. You want to be able to come out and walk through this world like a grown man. But then the traumatization, because I had never been in prison before, and I did 26 and a half years, I was traumatized just getting out of prison. Going from prison to prison was a trauma within itself, because you got to reestablish yourself. But then in the same totality, coming home was another form of trauma. And I had to deal with it accordingly at a very, very slow pace. Even now, I still deal with the anxiety traumas of crowded stores or crowded markets, or I went to a farmer's market at Christmas time. I seen all the lights and it kind of freaked me. Then I seen all the people. Right then I stopped and I need to go home. I went right back home and kind of locked up for 2 days, because the trauma of the crowds, we in crowds, something gonna happen. tension. But then these people just moving around and milling around doing, I'm not used to this. Anything move fast, somebody's gonna get hit. Anything that moves fast, gather too quick, something happening.
And let me ask a question. So during that time, what your response to that at that moment, that anxiety, was for you just to remove yourself from the situation?
Yeah, I had to, because that was what I got a counselor. I got my own psychologist counselor, and she's teaching me management skills. Mm-hmm. And one of my management skills was to remove myself and, degress by counting down, dhikr, a slight prayer, or affirmations. And then I'll try it again, or I'll just go and sit back, give myself a timeout, and go somewhere else so I can take that trauma, understand it, and try another way of dealing with it. Because if I go back in and it hit me again, I may never deal with it again. Mm-hmm. So that was her suggestion. I've been doing it, and I've been out 3 years. I still have issues with going grocery stores when it's crowded. Mm. I walk in Costco's, and Costco stay crowded. I turn around and walk out. So now I found out I go in the mornings, early in the mornings, when the elderly go in, and I tell them I'm disabled because of my PTSD, mm-hmm. and they'll let me in.
Okay.
So it's things that you can do that can help you, but you just have to ask for it. And I keep a coping skill buddy with me when I go a lot of places too. And most of them know I have a cue word. Mm-hmm. And I give them a cue word when I'm feeling uncomfortable and my anxiety's rising. I give them the keyword and they know to walk me out.
Got you. And again, because I wanted to definitely focus on things that we can do to help us deal with the trauma. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I had a friend of mine die a couple months ago. I had known him like probably 35 years in prison. He was a cellie for a while. And then when I got out, I hooked up with him, I was always over there. He was always calling me to come help him do some goddamn thing. Anyhow, a couple times I took him to the VA because he almost died because he had that breathing thing and he's smoking like a freight train. And so anyhow, he's up in Arkansas, and I guess he had an attack, and they called me and said, he might make 2 more days. That's about it. But I want to come up there. Told him no. And I said,
Is that because that was your way of coping with it? Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to, you know what? I don't want, never go to a funeral unless there ain't no way around it. Because let's say you passed away. I don't want to see you in a box. Uh-huh. I don't want to remember you in a box. Mm-hmm. That's not me. Mm-hmm. I told my sister, I said, you die and they put you in the box. Don't expect me up there. Because I'm not, I want to see you like I seen you. And they act like I did something wrong, and I'm thinking, no. I remember sitting in his house in the chair and calling him a prick and this and that, and that's the way it was, It's like I talked to Frank,
Right.
Frank's leaving.
No,
he moving up in the desert somewhere out of state. Somewhere where they got a big golf course. They offered him a free golf course cart with his trailer. So
he leaving us, he kicking us to the curb. Well, I guess you can understand that.
But I'm just saying that, everybody has their own way of dealing with stuff.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons, for me, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it is that we can, that everybody uses a different method to address their trauma. And if we share those methods, what worked for me may work for you. It may help you in your time of need, And so, did you want to say something, Di? Go ahead, sweetie.
That's like for me, like for funerals, me going to my mom's funeral, my grandma's and my grandpa's, that was enough for me. That was enough. So now, as years have been by, I don't go inside of no church. I'm not going inside of nothing. I don't want to go in there. I will come outside. I will stay outside as long as the service is being held, but I'm not coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not walking to the burial. I'm not doing none of those things. I don't want to do none of that no more. That feeling is a feeling, and plus it takes me down for a couple of days because it started bringing back all those memories again. So I don't go to no services like that. I will go out. I'll be outside. I will go to wherever y'all having the event with the food and set up that for you. But I'm not coming in no churches. I'm not going no burial. I'm not doing none of that. It took me 10 years to even go see my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It took me 10 years. I didn't even go to her service. I didn't want to do none of that. Mm-hmm. But it took me 10 years to even just go there and sit there. I went, and the first time my nerves was all shot out and everything. My brain wasn't working. But I went again and I sat and we talked, and it was different for me. It felt different because I was by myself. Mm-hmm. And that's how I wanted to be. I wanted to be just me and her,
mm-hmm.
But when those certain people pass away, it takes my brain back to all those, like trauma, those experiences, and it bothers me, So some days I don't want to talk, I don't want to do nothing. I don't like to feel like that. First of all, I don't like to feel out of control. That's one of my number one problems. I don't like to feel out of control. So me going to funerals and stuff, I know how it makes me feel. So I opt to be outside, and I just leave it at that.
And that is a method of coping with particular triggers that come. You see what I'm saying? You use that as a way of not putting, I put it this way, it's a preemptive way. You're gonna not set yourself up for the trauma. Because if you know it's going to trigger past traumas, then you're just not putting yourself in a situation that's going to trigger those things and cause you to go back into that space again, especially like you say, if it's causing you to be down for a couple of days, and you already know that that's what it's going to do. Again, these are ways to cope. Mr. Bradley, talk to me about how you've dealt with trauma.
Well, I'm agree with Diane. Trauma, comparing trauma and stuff. But and real flips about learning about trauma and what trauma is. That's what something I had to go through. But when it came to me years ago, as a kid, I was taught that trauma was something weakness. That if black have a weak trauma, he learned that trauma wasn't something weak. Trauma was emotional things that people go through of fear, fright, and horrible experience. And once I started realizing that this trauma wasn't natural, that with things that happened to me in life and things that happened to people I saw in life to them, because trauma, something happened to someone else, and that could cause me trauma. Because just because I saw that happen to that person, that with that fear in me, that traumatized me. But once I started realizing things happen in life is not my fault, and I kind of look at it in a different way as far as it's a reason for certain things, and like Diane was just saying, she can't go to the church when funerals and stuff, but she is going, but she's not going in. It's like, to me, person's like, she's trying to get over her trauma because she's there. She goes there outside. And that's the step of she trying to get over that trauma because she's there at the church. She just haven't went in. And so that's how I try to face my trauma in a different way, in a positive way, especially when I say it's not my fault that this happened to that person, and then again, I caused a lot of trauma to other people. So now I realize in my past, I caused a lot of trauma. And so I understand, like, trauma can be devastating on people. And like I said, by me coping with it, it's like now I realize what trauma really is, what trauma do to people, the emotional effect on So I was a person now. I always try to face my fears when it comes to trauma and things like that, things that I'm scared of, and that's how I get over it. There's nothing wrong with being afraid.
That's for
I'll be
sure.
afraid. I don't have a problem be saying I'm afraid of something. I told the dude the other day, I didn't want to get in the elevator. He said, why? Man, I'm scared something might happen. That thing might fall down. But I'm not being afraid of admitting this trauma, this fear. So that's how I learned how to get over it, because I'm not afraid to sin. I'm afraid of somebody. I'm not afraid to tell someone I'm afraid. I'm not afraid to ask a question. I'm not afraid to look for help, ask for help now. Let people
That's a
know what
great
I'm going
thing.
through,
That's a
how I feel.
great thing.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful point, is that just to acknowledge that you even have a fear of it, or that it is a traumatic situation for you, is one of the best things you could do, because then you can be helped. It's like with James acknowledging his, and then he has people that he has a word, a safe word that they use that will let them know, hey, I'm going through something, get me out of here. In other words, it's only by admitting that those things and those circumstances exist for us that we can actually get that kind of help for each other. You can't have the help if
and
you
he
don't even
also
want to
facing it.
have an issue.
Yeah. And he also learned how to deal with it, because he's going somewhere where he know he could be traumatized. So he tells someone, look, if I start, get me up out of here. So therefore he's facing the things that give him trauma, trying to get over it. So
Facing the
yeah,
fears. That's
I
true.
agree
That
with
is
him.
that's a good point. And I appreciate that. Gilbert, hi there. Unmute and talk to me. How have you coped with your traumas? Unmute.
Hear me?
Yep.
It's kind of interesting because, like, when I think about trauma, I haven't really went through trauma recently, like in my adult years. It's been a long time, but how I dealt with my trauma in the past was hitting rock bottom. And, thank God I survived that, but I had to hit my rock bottom in order to discover who I really was and how I survived, And today, I'm having problem with family members because we have a certain person in our family who's struggling with addiction right now, and I'm amazed about, like, not amazed, but I'm really surprised at how they treat her. It's like, I haven't been out here to see the damage she's done to the family, but they're so quick to give up on her. And I have to remind them. I go, well, weren't you like 40 years old when you turn your life around? And it's kind of heartbreaking because I know where I'm at in my life, and I'm not gonna risk my life for anybody. But I tell my cousin when I talk to her and I see her that I love her, that I'll support her. She could ask me for anything, if with it's in reason, and I'll do there and I'll be there for her. If it's 100th time that she discovers her change and her recovery, then it's 100 times. But my family just they're quick to disregard her, and it's heartbreaking to me. I don't understand it because we've all been through it, and the trauma was caused by our parents, our life. And like Rufus says, once I realized that it wasn't my fault, today the trauma if I have trauma today, it's because it's by choice. And I know there's some that we can't control. And you just had to remember, like Rufus said, that's not my fault. I'm not going to let it, it's going to affect me, but it's not going to break me. I'm not going to hit rock bottom no more. And, but,
And let me ask you this. And when you say you hit rock bottom, was that, were you using substances or?
I was in prison, and in 2007, my grandparents committed suicide, and I was already using drugs. But once they committed suicide, it broke my heart. But I used it as an excuse. That's what I realized. I did that by choice. Well, they're no longer here, so I could just do whatever I want. I try to say, it was because of them passing and the suicide that. But it was really my choice. That's how I discovered, like, but I did spiral. I spiraled out of control. And I mean, my life, I found myself in the hole. I lost everything. People were trying to kill me and everything. But I realized going through that, I had to hit that. I had to, if it wasn't for that, I don't know what my life would have been like. But today, you know, if I experience something similar, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be heartbreaking. But like I said, I'm not gonna go through that no more because that was my choice. And I know that if I do, it's because, you know, I'm misguiding. I'm misguiding my mind, or I don't know. You know, it's just something that I can't say that I'm prepared for, but I know because of my past trauma that what it's not going to bring back to me. It's not going to bring back those failures no more. You know, and
Well, you know,
you
one of
know,
the things I was thinking, the reason I asked the question is because it occurred to me that when you say you hit rock bottom, that you probably were using a substance that as the result of an original trauma. So there was a
yeah,
trauma that started you on that path. There was when you talk about your parents and the experiences, those things were traumatic that caused you to go somewhere
yeah,
and do some things. And then it was just added on top of that, which caused you to spiral in such a way
yeah,
that you can put your hands on that and you can see what that is. And now you know that was rock bottom for you. But it also, in that moment, it was also a big thing, or a big plus, because it caused you to have to face some things about yourself. It caused you to have to acknowledge that you were using it for an excuse, and it caused you to recognize you can never do that again.
right. And that's why, like, I kind of sympathize for my cousin. And they forget, you know, she went through foster homes. She went through, they lost her. And who knows what they don't know. I don't know if they sat down and asked her what she went through, but I did. And I wanted to know what she went through, you know, during those years. And that was like from 5 years old till she was like 16. She was abused. And that's why I said, like, why, you know, can't you guys take some responsibility? I know you guys have, and I know they say, well, it's just time for her to grow up. She's an adult. Well, like I said, well, you were 40 years old when you turned your life around, and she's only 33. I'm not saying she's going to take her that long. Hopefully it doesn't, but be a little bit more sympathetic. And again, I haven't been out there to see what she's done to them, you know, how many times she's told them.
Right.
But I know that it took me a lot of times, and I know that I've been through it, and it took me more, you know, more times than I could count. But, you know, like I said, if it's her 100th time, you know, I'll be there and I'll support her. But I don't know. It's just kind of amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that with us. Mr. Hall, you want to talk to us about your methods? Any skills or tools that you've learned along the way to help you deal with trauma?
Yeah. For me, for a long time, I didn't even know it was trauma because I just thought that I, I just thought that I went through these bad experiences and I didn't have a label for it, and I just I used to like not even talk about it. Like I think one of the gentlemen said I was scared to ask for help or whatever, you know. So in the past, for me, I just turned to like alcohol, weed, trying not to think about it, you know, trying to be hard, deal with the situation in a macho way. And but later on, once I did start going to classes and stuff, and I began to learn about trauma and how it affected my life, then I began to develop tools. And some of the tools is like, you know, I do a lot of praying, meditating. Uh, Now I do ask for help. You know, I know that's very important. Talking to somebody, helping you to heal, where you can resolve the issue so you can move forward in life. So I think one of the best things to do is talk to somebody. You have to get that stuff out. You have to talk about it.
You know, I'm so glad that you brought those things up, because those are literally, like, this is what you can do: meditate, pray, ask for help. We talked about being of service to other people. Talk about it. All those things will help you deal with it. Mr. Tillman, talk to me. There you go.
Can y'all hear me?
Uh-huh.
I mean, me myself, I'm like, I don't want to see nobody in a box, so I don't go to funerals. You know, last funeral I went to, I didn't even go by the casket because I ain't into that. I want to remember the person by how I remember when they was alive. And I have a lot of different coping methods that I use, and I'll go to the beach. I'm in the house and I'll just chill, just meditate, pray. But different situations, they call for different things, different coping mechanisms. If I'm in traffic or, somewhere in a public place and someone is tripping, I'll just do a lot of self-talk. I do a lot of self-talk. I'm like, ooh, wee, God, please help me. Give me the strength.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And it all just depends on the situation, where I am, and what it's about, how severe it is, and that's what my coping methods come in at, is like I said. So, and then sometimes if it's just like I just need to go to the beach, that's like my sanctuary. I go to the beach, Redondo Beach or Malibu Beach, and just get connected to the universe and just chill. You know what I mean? And just relax and just take it in. Just take it in, but being calm. Listen to music sometimes. It's different stuff, but I have a lot of different. Like I said, it's different things, and sometimes I'm like, gotta just get it out. There's different ways you got to get that out, and so it's not just one way all the time, or one way for everything, So different things might trigger you off, and you might want to do it this way this time. So it's just different things for me.
That's
so
for sure. That's a very important point, is that one size ain't gonna fit all, right? And what may work, that's one of the reasons why I wanted everybody to kind of, share what they do, because it may not have occurred to somebody to go to the beach or to realize how valuable or how much it can help you cope with things. Some things may not occur to people. So as we share those things, it's just valuable information to have, is for us to be able to share these things one with another and help somebody else along the way. I want to come in-house here. Miss Cheryl, you want to talk to us about things that you do to cope with trauma?
I don't cope.
You don't? What you do? You just
hit him on the head or what?
What did he say?
He said he wanted to know if she hit him on the head.
Oh wow.
So we don't advocate violence. So what happens? It just lives there, and you just live with it every day. You just live with it where it is. That is a way to deal with it. Look, not what I would suggest. Look, but let me tell you something else. I had a trauma recently, and Miss Diana, I said I wanted to cry. She said, go ahead and cry. Just go ahead and cry. Have it. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes that's going to help. Miss Roberta, talk to us about ways that you've dealt with trauma.
I haven't. I'm just learning now to lean on friends.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good thing. Mr. Willie, you wanted to say something. Let me unmute you. You can unmute.
Yes. I want to say, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when you had no one that you could go to for help because of the trauma that was plagued on you, nobody cared. Nobody wanted to hear how you felt. Right. And so what you do, in my case, I self-medicated with drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. That drug and alcohol within me turned me into something else. Then I became angry. I became fearful. I understood when someone said, Mr. Bradley talked about the fear. When you have fear, when you have pain, and when you have anger, and you have no outlet for that, mm-hmm. It balls inside you. It filters inside you. And so you grow up with this feeling. You think because you feel this way, and because you're self-medicating yourself, that it helps you to become what you became. And then you can't live with yourself. Mm-hmm. So I say to the panel, this subject tonight is very therapeutic. And I'm so glad that that you have this platform, that we could do this, because I think it need to be viewed and other aspect because trauma has a life of its own. And as someone said, one level is no greater than the next level.
That's
but
right.
It all of it is painful.
Got you. And so, Ms. Dodd, did I see your hand up, sweetie?
Yes. Another thing I do to deal when I feel myself getting that little zone, you know, like I said, when I was going through my depression, when I didn't know what it was, I have Alexa over here on the side of my bed, and I have candles in my room and these little lights. I turn them on. I have a playlist of my gospel playlist, and I let the candles on because my room is already dark. I like it dark like this, and I just lay in here and just meditate to myself. Because sometimes I don't want to talk to nobody.
Got you. Yeah. So you say your candles, and you said there was something else next to your bed.
I have Alexa next to my bed, and I have
Alexa. Alexa.
Yeah. And I have a gospel.
That heifer. Okay, I see.
Yeah,
that heifer should be working it out.
Yeah,
Alexa,
she works it all
Alexa
out.
about your playlist.
Yeah, she got my little gospel playlist always ready to go for me.
What else
And
you
I have my candles, and I just sitting in my room to myself.
You know, he over here talking about what else you got next to your bed. Just act like he didn't even say nothing.
Why you ain't here? Why you ain't here?
I'm gonna talk to you.
Okay. Yeah. So those are all good things. You know, I'm glad that again that we're talking about it. Like I said last week, I knew we would talk about it again this week, but I wanted to make sure that we were talking and offering tools for each of us to be able to use, not just to talk about it, you know, and not have any suggestions on how we can make it better. So what I want to do, I want to give everybody an opportunity, last comments, anything from today that you guys can use, and go from there. Go ahead.
You know, a lot of times that I just don't care. You know, it's easier to say to hell with it and go on your merry way. As long as you don't put your hands on me and get physically, you can kiss my ass.
Okay.
That's, you know, everybody goes different ways, but since I know I can't shoot nobody no more, I just as soon just tell them, get out of my face and go on your way. Now, if you do something to me physically, then it's another story. But I don't let people bother me anymore. It ain't worth it. It ain't worth the headaches. You know, when I was young and was inside, somebody would do something to me and I'd get so mad that I wouldn't cool off till I did something to them. And then one day the nurse on the yard, I was all peed off about something. And she says, come in the office. And I told her, I ain't going in the damn infirmary. And she says, well, you are because I told you. So I went in there and she took my blood pressure and it was floating up there somewhere. And she said, well, tomorrow you come back and see the doctor. So I came back the next day because she ducked me. And once they got my blood pressure where it's supposed to be, I was really surprised. I didn't get as mad. I didn't blow up, you know. So sometimes when you get, it's just your blood pressure getting out of whack.
Well, is that what happens to me? That's why we want to fight every time I get around you, because my blood pressure. I'm trying to figure out. It's all making sense. You know what I'm saying? Now it's all making sense.
My blood pressure
he make my blood pressure go up. That's what it is. Now we know. James going. Hey, Doc.
See what I'm saying? My blood pressure is already high.
James hit my chair. He over here tapping my chair. Okay, you know how it go. Okay. All right.
No, Miss Roberta's sitting right there. I ain't worried about it.
She got me. You got my back. That's right. Okay, so I'm gonna let Patrick talk. I'm gonna let Patrick say any last comments, anything that stuck out to you tonight.
the fact that we're talking about this, and for me, it's like the 70s and the 80s again. It used to not be a bad word for mental health or trauma or talking about it in the 70s and 80s. We were a better society. We took care of each other back then.
Right.
And then for the last 30, 40 years, we said, screw everybody. And it's me, me, me. And guess what? Even yourself can't take care of yourself.
How
You
about
said
that?
it yourself. We need help. You have to share. So the fact that mental illness and asking for help isn't the wrong thing to do, it's the right thing to do, and we're swaying back the other way to help everybody, that's a good thing. So the fact that we're doing this, and like you said, we need to recur and do this like every 3 or 4 months, because we're always going to have trauma, pardon the expression, in this damn fucking society we live in.
Exactly. Yes, because it's always going to be a new one. You can count on that. That's the one thing you can count on, is it's going to be some more stuff somewhere along the way. So thank you. Mr. Terry. Can you unmute? There you go.
Yeah, Noreen, you know, being traumatized in prison was a kind of a hard thing for me. First thing when I did, I saw the yard go down, people getting shot, and people fighting and stabbing one another. I pretty much got traumatized about that because I had to live in that predicament for 26 years. So all prisons I went to, I saw the same old thing. So it kind of traumatized me a little bit, but I got over it and moved on down the road.
Good. And I'm glad you don't have to use substances anymore. I'm glad that you've been able to maintain your sobriety, you know, despite all of that, you know, once you got clean, you've been able to maintain it, because that is one of the ways that people cope with it. They self-medicate. So that's a good thing. That's a great thing. Thank you. Mr. Bradley.
Yeah, me, I learned that it's good to talk about it and ask for help to get to understand why do I feel this way. And the best thing is when you share and other people share with you, you get the chance to understand it more, what trauma is.
Yes, that's for sure. That's a fact. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I feel the same as Mr. Lionel. The more you share, the better for you, because you're able to get past it, you're able to heal.
Yeah, that's for sure. Definitely sharing actually helps. Kit, can you unmute? Kittredge? I'm going to come back to you. Gilbert, any final thoughts, anything you're going to take away from tonight?
Yeah, just about what everybody said, you know, trying to ask for help, getting it. But one of the things I try to understand is that, you know, trauma is controlled from the outside, really. And if you let it infect you internally, it's because of you. And what I try to do today, just have a little bit of compassion. And when someone's rejected me or treated me a certain way, you know, I just know it's their right. And if it's not abusive, then maybe I just let them be. And then if they are abusive, and if it's for no reason, I just try to have a bit of understanding and compassion for them, because maybe they're going through something in life. But I'm not gonna allow myself to be treated or abused or put in trauma that I could control. You know, and once it happens, then you know I know it's not my fault.
Thank you. Thank you. Rufus, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I disagree with most of the people who said that this is an important topic, and that we should revisit this
periodically. His phone froze. It froze. Di, you want to go ahead? Any final comments, thoughts?
Oh, the comment I had and the thought I had was I like talking about being open.
Completely over it. I don't think you ever completely over it. We just know how to, you know, how to.
It's kind of going in and out, Rufus. It's going in and out, babe. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Di.
I was gonna say what he just said. I don't think, like I said, you're never really over trauma because that's something you have to live with. But living in your truth with the trauma, it helps you deal with it better.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm gonna let the in-house folks. Anything you got from tonight?
Every time I hear about trauma, I just always think about the children who are in trauma that can't cope with it because they don't know how to express that they're in trauma. They don't.
Maureen.
Go ahead, kid.
Okay, but see, the only problem I have is with this here. We have trauma, and we deal with it differently than everybody else. Most of the time, you got two choices: stick your head under the cover and just try to duck and dodge it, or go out and deal with it head on like a man. And that's the way I've been dealing with it, head on. And I found out that ain't working for me. So now I just tried to avoid it as much as possible.
Okay, I need to take a step back and make sure I understood what you just said. So when trauma has happened in the past, your response to that has been to just deal with it head on or whatever. And
a violent response.
Okay, how to respond. Okay, so hopefully, there'll be some things that you got from this conversation that, heaven forbid you have to deal with another trauma coming up, that you got some other skills you can add to it. So that'd be great. And I'm glad that you were part of the conversation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. James.
I just, trauma is just part of your journey. And it's going to be a part of your life, whether you want to deal with it or not. It's going to be an element of who you are that builds your character. That's going to help to validate who you are as a taxpaying citizen in society. Because all of us are taxpaying, whether you buy a bag of chips or soda, anything, you're paying a tax. But myself is, you have to find what brings you your peace and your calm in your life, and what drives you into the next level of your progress when you're off parole, because that's another process within itself. So I get to use it in a way that I'm still growing, and I'm still experiencing, and I'm still learning, and I'm still fighting the fight as far as healing myself.
Good.
So as long as I lean on y'all and lean on my group here, this is my comfort zone. And I love my comfort zone. This is where I can be me.
That's awesome.
No mask.
Okay. Awesome. And we love him. We put up with him. Any final comments, dear?
Yeah, I was just building off what Cheryl said as a child, because I was once that child, but nowadays we have resources where when I was growing up, we didn't know who to look to. And so
there you go.
Just the children.
Yeah, good. Ma'am.
And my summation is your trauma is a suitcase. You don't shed your trauma, you just repack it. You learn how to pack that suitcase so that it fits for you, because we're all going to have traumas throughout our lives from day one to the day that we die. But we have to learn how to deal with those traumas. Sometimes we're dealing with those traumas real rapidly and it's hanging out of our suitcases. But for me, in the end, I learned how to repack that suitcase and move my trauma along with me a lot better. I'm no longer overweight at the ticket counter. I can put my trauma in a carry-on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. That's perfect. And I just want to say, for me, sorry, y'all, I'm making a mess. Don't trip. Everything all right. Everything all right. I'm so grateful that we've had this conversation. I'm grateful for everybody's transparency and everybody's willingness to share what they do, because somebody's going to be helped with all of this. Didn't nobody cut you out? I came to you first.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Yes, the fuck I did. Yes, the fuck I did. I came to your ass first. I know I don't give a fuck. I'm recording. I'm proud of this motherfucker talking about I'm fucking no. I came his ass first. You got something to say? You about to say it. You better have something to say. Because if you don't, it's going down. You better have something to say. He did. Okay.
He laughing so hard.
Anyway, they going to the hole. These ain't going to the hole. We're gonna put them in the hole. Cut that to the shoe. They need something. Either they going or I'm going. You know,
I was going to say.
What was you going to say?
I was going to say that I don't have that much drama because of this class.
Well, good. What you said first? You was talking about why you don't go to the funerals.
That was a long time ago.
Anyway, you know what, y'all? Yes, Mr. Stephens, please. You're gonna say something useful.
I just want to say thank you, Ms. Oreen, and the panel for the spiritual healing that I have received tonight. And there's a lot of things that was said. There's a lot of aspect of how trauma do affect you and what you can do about it. And, you know, I'm like Mr. James, go and seek professional help when you're experiencing things that you don't have answers to. And, you know, again, when I talked about self-medication, I'm still self-medicating, but it's not drugs.
Good, that's wonderful. And thank you.
I want to thank you.
That's a much better note for us to end on than me cussing Pike out over here, okay? So I am grateful for all of y'all, but y'all know we speak whatever language we spoke up in here, including cussing Pike out. Okay? We love having you guys. I'm grateful that all of you guys are here every week, and I'm glad that we can do anything that can be of service. Again, this is Free to Heal. We'll be back next week. I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you soon. You guys have a good night here.
You too.
All right.
Good night.